The auctioneer's gavel echoed like a gunshot. 5 million. Someone barked in Korean from the front row. Another voice countered almost immediately, 6. The hall hummed with tension as masked servers glided between bidders with champagne flutes. The jade figurine gleamed under the spotlight, as though mocking Daniela's heartbeat. She tried to steady her breathing. She was invisible here, or she had been, until the man at her side tore that illusion apart. Yunbin. She'd heard the name whispered in academic circles, usually with lowered voices and sidelong glances. The Yun family was one of those dynasty clans: real estate, shipping, politics. But beneath all that shiny legitimacy was something darker. People called Yunbin the curator of shadows. If there was art or an artifact with blood on it, chances were it had passed through his hands. And now those same hands held her catalog. He closed it slowly, like a man finishing a puzzle, and turned toward her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with sharp amusement. She leaned closer, voice low so only he could hear. Because bold is the only thing keeping me from screaming for security right now. He arched an eyebrow. Security works for me. Her stomach dropped. Mafia Heir. Before she could retort, the bidding for the jade figurine climbed higher. 7 million. 8. 9. Daniela's eyes scanned the catalog again, her academic instincts fighting her survival instinct. Something about the entry didn't match. The symbol for jade had been altered, a small mark, a diagonal line. She frowned. Yunbin noticed. Of course he did. What do you see? He asked softly. She shook her head. Nothing. His gaze sharpened. Lying doesn't suit you. Against her better judgment, she leaned toward him, whispering quickly, that piece isn't Tang Dynasty. It's late in Qing. A forgery. A very expensive forgery. For a split second, Yunbin went still. Then his mouth curved in a slow, dangerous smile. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer boomed, sold at 9.5 million. The crowd applauded, oblivious. Yunbin rose from his seat and extended a hand to Daniela. His tone was polite, but his eyes gleamed with wicked mischief. Stand up, he said. What? Why? Because, Miss Cruz, he murmured, you've just cost one of my rivals $10 million. And unless you want to leave this room in pieces, you'll stand when I say. Her pulse skittered. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. But then she noticed the way heads were turning toward them, rival bidders, sharp eyes, calculating gazes. They'd noticed her. Daniela swallowed hard, slipped her hand into his, and stood. Yunbin's smile widened. He addressed the room in flawless Korean, his voice calm but commanding. Though she didn't catch every word, she understood enough. He had just introduced her. Not as a stranger. Not as a trespasser. As his guest. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The suspicious stares softened into polite nods, wary respect. No one touched what belonged to Yunbin. Daniela's breath caught. She wasn't sure if he'd just saved her life, or signed her into a contract she couldn't escape. Yunbin leaned down, close enough that only she could hear. Congratulations, Daniela, he whispered. You've been promoted from trespasser to property. Try to enjoy the upgrade. Her eyes flashed, heat rising to her cheeks. I'm nobody's property. This time, his laugh was genuine, low, warm, startling. We'll see. The moment the next lot was announced, Yunbin tugged her hand, leading her away from the velvet chairs and curious stares. Daniela stumbled slightly in her too-tight gown, hissing under her breath. Do you mind? I have legs, you know. They function just fine without you yanking me like. Like what? His tone was mild, but his grip remained steady. Like you own them. The corner of his mouth curved. Maybe I do. Her cheeks burned. She hated that heat, hated how easily he got under her skin. They slipped behind heavy curtains into a side corridor, guarded by men in black with eyes like loaded pistols. The guards nodded to Yunbin, ignoring Daniela entirely. For some reason, that annoyed her more than being dragged around like luggage. Through a set of double doors, they entered a private salon overlooking the main auction hall. Crystal glasses gleamed on polished trays, low music hummed, and clusters of men and women in designer suits spoke in hushed voices. Deals were being struck here, she realized. Quiet ones. Dangerous ones. Yunbin released her hand only long enough to pick up 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to her, watching as she hesitated. "You think I'd poison you?" he asked, amused. "I think you'd absolutely poison someone," she shot back. "But probably not in a glass of Veuve Clicquot. Too wasteful." He laughed softly, that maddening, genuine sound that made her chest tighten against her will. "You learn quickly." Daniela sipped, if only to buy time. The champagne was cold and sharp on her tongue, a poor match for the heat building in her veins. She forced herself to focus on the room. Every conversation around them had layers, a phrase about delivery that clearly wasn't about furniture, a mention of acquisitions that had nothing to do with legal contracts. Her academic instincts prickled. Symbols and codes weren't only on paper. They lived in gestures, glances, words. She tilted her head, listening closer. "You're doing it again." Yunbin's voice pulled her back. He was watching her over the rim of his glass, eyes dark, intent. "Doing what?" "Decoding my world." He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Careful, Daniela. You might understand too much." "Or maybe," she murmured, "I already do." Something flickered in his expression then. Not amusement, not danger, but something sharper, something almost vulnerable. But before she could read it, a man in a silver suit approached, smiling too broadly. "Yunbin," the man greeted in Korean, his tone oily. His gaze slid to Daniela, lingering too long. "And who is this?" Yunbin's arm moved without hesitation, resting across the back of her chair in a gesture of possession so natural it made her breath catch. "My guest," he said evenly. The man's smile tightened. He spoke again in rapid Korean, something Daniela couldn't catch, but she saw the intent in his eyes. Suspicion. Yunbin responded with silk and steel, his voice calm but cutting. The man chuckled nervously, excused himself, and left. Daniela exhaled. "What did he say?" "That you're too pretty to be just an academic," Yunbin replied. "He asked what you really are." "And what did you tell him?" Yunbin leaned close, so close she caught the scent of cedar and smoke again. His lips curved. "That you're mine." Her pulse skipped. She set her glass down with a sharp clink. "You have a very unhealthy obsession with claiming ownership of people. Maybe try therapy?" He chuckled. "You'd make a terrible therapist. Too honest. And you'd make a terrible patient. Too stubborn." Their eyes locked, fire and challenge, champagne bubbles between them. Daniela's mouth went dry. Then the doors burst open. A servant stumbled in, blood staining the cuff of his white glove. Gasps rippled through the room. Yunbin rose instantly, his mask of charm slipping into steel. Daniela's gut twisted. Whatever was happening outside that salon, it wasn't just about artifacts anymore. Blood had a way of silencing a room faster than any gavel. The servant swayed in the doorway, a dark stain blooming across his white glove. He muttered something in Korean, voice cracking, before collapsing. The champagne crowd scattered, whispers cutting sharp through the air. Daniela froze. Her brain screamed get out, but her body was rooted to the chair, eyes locked on the spreading pool of crimson. Yunbin didn't flinch. He crossed the room with controlled grace, crouched and checked the man's pulse. His jaw tightened, but his voice was calm when he barked orders to the guards. 2 men rushed forward, dragging the body away as though it were no more than a broken vase. Daniela's stomach turned. What just happened?" she whispered. Yunbin straightened, eyes dark as onyx. "A message." That was all he said. She stared at him, her skin prickling. A message? Someone was bleeding out just yards away, and he said it like it was a telegram. That was her breaking point. She stood abruptly, champagne glass clattering on the table. "Nope. Absolutely not. I'm done. I'm not cut out for," her hands flailed. "Whatever this is. Black market art, dead waiters, creepy rich people whispering like Bond villains. I'm leaving." She turned toward the door, already rehearsing her excuse for slipping past the guards. Tourist lost her way. Mistaken identity. Anything. But a hand caught her wrist. Not rough. Not cruel. Just certain. You walk out there right now, Yunbin said, his voice low, steady, and you won't make it to the street. Daniela whipped around, yanking her wrist free. So you're saying I'm a hostage now? His lips curved, though there was no humor in it this time. I'm saying you're a target. Her pulse thudded. He let the words sink in before adding, softer, and I don't let people take what's mine. There was again that claim. That infuriating, possessive word. But this time, something inside her chest twisted differently. Because beneath the arrogance, she heard something else, protection. And protection in this place was currency. She swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the door. Already, 2 men in suits were glancing in her direction. Not the friendly kind of glance. The predator kind. Her breath hitched. Fine, she muttered, spinning back toward Yunbin. But for the record, I am choosing to stay. This is not me being owned or claimed or... Noted, he said smoothly, placing a hand on the small of her back. The touch was infuriatingly casual, yet her whole body jolted like he'd pressed a live wire against her spine. She shot him a glare, but he only smirked, guiding her toward a private corridor behind velvet drapes. The chaos of the auction hall faded as they moved deeper into the underbelly of the mansion. Daniela's heels clicked too loudly on the marble, betraying the jitter of her nerves. She whispered, so, do we, call the police at some point? Or is that not how billion-dollar mafia blood feuds work? His laugh was low, almost reluctant. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish. Why do I feel like that's your way of flirting? It is. Her heart stumbled at his frankness, but she quickly covered it with a sharp retort. Well, you need better material. They rounded a corner, and suddenly Yunbin stopped. His hand came up, signaling silence. Daniela's breath caught as 2 men appeared ahead, blocking the corridor. They weren't guards. Their suits were cheaper, their eyes hungrier. Rival clan. One of them smiled at Daniela in a way that made her skin crawl. He said something in Korean, and the tone alone was enough to send chills down her spine. Yunbin's posture shifted, effortless. Like a man who could dismantle 2 bodies before she blinked. But then Daniela made a choice she didn't expect of herself. Instead of shrinking back, she squared her shoulders and said firmly, "You 2 look like the kind of guys who get tricked by fake Tang figurines. Am I right?" The men blinked, confused. Yunbin stared at her, startled. Then, unbelievably, a laugh burst from his chest, sharp, genuine, and utterly delighted. "You're insane," he whispered, eyes blazing with admiration. The rivals lunged. And Yunbin moved faster than she thought humanly possible. The world slowed down. Daniela barely had time to gasp before Yunbin shoved her back against the marble wall, his arm pinning her there just as the first rival lunged. What happened next didn't look human. Yunbin caught the man's wrist mid-strike, twisted, and the sound of bones snapping echoed down the corridor. The man's scream cut short as Yunbin's elbow drove into his throat, dropping him to the floor in a heap. The second one charged. Yunbin didn't hesitate. He pivoted, sleek as a dancer, grabbed a champagne bottle from a passing tray left abandoned on a side table, and smashed it across the man's face. Glass shattered, spraying glittering shards. Blood followed, hot and immediate. Daniela's stomach lurched. She had studied violent eras of history, seen depictions of wars and atrocities in museum archives, but nothing compared to the raw, brutal elegance of Yunbin in motion. The man staggered, clutching his face, but Yunbin didn't give him the chance to recover. He drove his knee up hard, sending the rival crashing to the floor beside his companion. Both groaned, broken, alive only because Yunbin allowed it. For a moment, the corridor was silent except for Daniela's ragged breathing. Yunbin turned back to her, perfectly calm, not even a bead of sweat on his temple. His black suit was spotless, as though he hadn't just dismantled 2 grown men in less than 10 seconds. He tilted his head, studying her pale face. "You're shaking." Daniela pressed a hand to her mouth. You just... She gestured helplessly at the unconscious men. Like it was nothing. It was nothing. That's not normal. Neither is decoding my catalog at a glance, he countered smoothly. Her mouth opened again. So that's it? You just break people like teacups. Yunbin's lips curved slightly. Only when they try to touch what's mine. There it was again. That word. But before Daniela could fire back, a sharp laugh bubbled out of her, high, nervous, completely inappropriate. She slapped a hand over her mouth, horrified at herself. Yunbin's brows lifted, genuinely amused. You laugh at broken bones? No, I mean, I laugh when I'm traumatized, okay? She blurted. It's either that or throw up, and you're standing way too close for the second option. For the first time, Yunbin laughed so hard his shoulders shook. The sound filled the corridor, warm and disarming, completely at odds with the carnage at their feet. Daniela stared at him, breathless. This man was terrifying. Magnetic. Impossible. And she was in way over her head. A groan rose from one of the rivals on the ground. Yunbin crouched, gripped the man's collar, and hissed something in Korean that made the man's eyes widen with pure fear. Then he let him drop, standing with the casual grace of someone brushing off dust. He turned to Daniela, extending his hand again. Not demanding this time. Offering. Come with me. Her chest tightened. She should run. She should scream. She should bolt into the night and never look back. But the truth was brutal in its simplicity. Without him, she wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this world. Her hand trembled as it hovered over his. And then, against every instinct screaming otherwise, she placed her fingers in his palm, and as he led her deeper into the mansion's labyrinth, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't just following him because she needed protection. She was following him because some wild, reckless part of her wanted to. The deeper Yunbin led her into the mansion, the more the chaos faded behind them. The marble floors gave way to warm wooden panels, corridors lined with silk tapestries and dim golden light. It didn't feel like the lair of a Mafia heir anymore. It felt like a museum. And that was the trap, Daniela realized. Beauty as camouflage. He stopped in front of a set of double doors carved with dragons. With a quiet push, he revealed a private suite that made her breath hitch. It was nothing like she'd expected. No guns on display, no stacks of cash or thrones of gold. Instead, the room was filled with art. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held porcelain vases, lacquered boxes, scrolls in protective glass. A half-finished ink painting rested on an easel by the window, brush strokes delicate but powerful. Daniela blinked. You paint? Yunbin glanced at the easel, then at her. Sometimes. She gawked. The man who just shattered someone's ribcage with a champagne bottle also does watercolor? His lips curved. Not watercolor. Right, because that's the detail I should be focused on here. She folded her arms, forcing her nerves into sarcasm. Do you also crochet in your spare time? Maybe run a book club for international smugglers. His chuckle was soft this time, low in his chest. You never stop talking, do you? Only when unconscious, she shot back. Their eyes met. The banter sparked like flint against steel, but underneath it, something heavier brewed. Yunbin moved across the room, pouring whiskey into 2 crystal glasses. He handed one to her without asking if she wanted it. Daniela accepted anyway, mostly because her hands needed something to do besides shake. Why me? She asked after a long sip, her voice quieter now. Why not just let your men toss me out with the rest of the casualties? He studied her over the rim of his glass. Because you're different. Different how? You see patterns others don't. You saw the forgery. Daniela's lips parted. So I'm useful to you. His gaze sharpened, but he didn't deny it. More than you realize. The admission made her stomach twist. Useful meant valuable. Valuable meant leverage. And leverage in this world was dangerous. She set her glass down with a deliberate clink. For the record, I don't work for criminals. Yunbin's mouth tilted. No. But you're sitting in a criminal's room, drinking his whiskey. Touché, she muttered. He moved closer, so close she caught that cedar smoke scent again. His presence wrapped around her like velvet, soft, suffocating, impossible to ignore. "You should rest here tonight," he said simply. Her head snapped up. "Excuse me? It isn't safe to leave. My rivals already know you're important to me." "I'm not important to you," she snapped. "I'm just a catalog nerd who got very, very lost." His lips curved again. "And yet, here you are. In my world." She hated the way his voice lowered on that last word, like it wasn't just fact, it was fate. Daniela backed up a step, her heart hammering. "If this is some kind of velvet cage, Yunbin, I promise you, I bite." He smiled. "Dangerous. Beautiful. Good," he murmured. "I like when my cage fights back." Her breath caught. She hated herself for the shiver that ran down her spine. And she hated him even more for noticing. The night pressed against the mansion's windows like a living thing. Daniela lay awake on the velvet sofa, staring at the ceiling fresco of painted clouds, feeling more like a trapped bird than a guest. Sleep refused to come. Not with Yunbin's words echoing in her mind. "My rivals already know you're important to me." Important. She wasn't sure she liked how the words sat on her skin. She rose quietly, padding across the room in her bare feet. The whiskey on the table glowed amber in the lamplight, untouched since she'd put it down. She considered pouring herself more liquid courage, but her stomach was already tight with nerves. She reached the balcony instead, pushing open the sliding doors. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the hum of the city beyond the high walls. Freedom was out there, just out of reach. Thinking of jumping? The voice made her whip around. A figure detached itself from the shadows. A man in a dark suit, not one of Yunbin's. His smile was sharp, his eyes hungrier than the ones she'd seen earlier in the corridor. Her heart stuttered. "How did you?" "Getting into Yunbin's nest isn't hard if you know the right cracks," the man said smoothly, stepping closer. "The real challenge is getting out. Something I imagine you want very much, Miss Cruz." Daniela's pulse thundered. He knew her name. She forced her voice steady. "If you're here to pitch me a travel package, I should warn you, I'm not in the market." The man chuckled, clearly amused by her bravado. "Clever. No wonder he likes you." He leaned against the balcony rail, studying her. "But let me guess, you're not exactly thrilled about being his possession?" Her jaw tightened. He smiled wider. "I can give you a way out. A plane ticket, a new passport. Freedom." She swallowed. "And the catch?" His eyes gleamed. "All you have to do is hand me what Yunbin values most. The catalog. The codes. Whatever you've already deciphered. You're good at puzzles, aren't you? That's why you're still alive." Daniela's stomach dropped. He wasn't wrong. Her ability to read patterns had put her in Yunbin's orbit and painted a target on her back. The man extended his hand. "So, do we have a deal?" For one wild second she imagined it, a flight out of Seoul. Back to her quiet life of museums and manuscripts in New Zealand. But Yunbin's face rose unbidden in her mind. The way he'd fought for her. The way he'd laughed when she snapped at him. The way he'd said "you're mine" like it was both a threat and a promise. Her chest ached. Daniela forced a smile, tilting her head like she was considering. "But there's just one tiny problem." "Oh." The rival leaned closer. She dropped her voice, dry as dust. "I don't trust men who crawl out of shadows at midnight like they're auditioning for Dracula, the musical." The man blinked, then scowled. "You're making a mistake." Find out what happens in their relationship in the next episode, which is coming up soon, by clicking on the notification icon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also tell us the country you are watching us from in the comments section so that we will make a story for you.